everyone. This video is a part of anesthesia videos of Edusurg Surgical Clinics. I am Dr. Samidha Varadkar, Consultant Anesthesiology at Lilavati Hospital and Research Center, Bandra. In today's video, we are going to discuss the applied anatomy of the spine for regional anesthesia and analgesia. In the previous video, we had seen the different types of regional anesthesia techniques, spinal and epidural anesthesia, which is a part of central neuraxial block, and peripheral nerve blocks. Today's discussion on the applied anatomy is going to be about the central neuraxial block. Central neuraxial anesthesia. In this, the anesthetic drug is placed directly in the intrathecal space, also known as the sub-arachnoid space. This defines the spinal anesthesia. In epidural analgesia and anesthesia, the drug is injected in the epidural space. So to have a good success of your block, it is very relevant to have knowledge about both anatomy and good patient positioning. So without having both, it is not possible to achieve success in your block. Of course, in today's video, we are going to restrict to the anatomical part. So applied anatomy, for ease of discussion, we have created these subdivisions, vertebrae, ligaments, spaces, and layers. So this will help us understand the spinal anatomy in a simplified way. So let's first see the vertebrae. This is a simple diagram, a lateral view of the vertebral column or the spinal of the spine. We have labeled the anterior part. So the vertebral bodies come in the anterior part, and posteriorly you have the spinous processes. So when you're doing a procedure, what you feel on the back of the patient are spinal processes. So these are simply a stack of vertebrae. So as you can see, each vertebra is articulating with the one above and below with the articulating facets, and this allows the movement of the spine in sync. So you can bend forward, backwards, and rotation movements. Also, depending on the anatomical location of these vertebrae, they are further divided into cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral vertebrae. So there are 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, and 5 fused sacral vertebrae, and at the end you have the coccyx. Also, it's important to note there is this natural curvatures of the spine. There are 4 curvatures. These are normal anatomical curvatures. When there is any exacerbation, then it is called pathological curvatures. So again, anterior and posterior, there are 4 curvatures. The 2 forward curvatures are in the cervical and the lumbar area, which is called the lordosis, and the one in the thoracic and sacral areas are called kyphosis. So with any disease process, these can get exacerbated. For example, in pregnancy, you can have an exaggerated lumbar lordosis. To go further, we are describing a single vertebra here. Okay, so here is the body, which is anterior. Then you have the spinous processes, which is posterior, what you feel on the back of the patient. You have the lamina. Okay, then you can also see the pedicles and the articulating facets. In the center is the space where you get the vertebral canal. It is a bony structure which runs from the foramen magnum to the sacral hiatus. So basically from skull base to right below, it contains the spinal cord and nerve roots within the meninges. Now, why are we specifically discussing? We want to compare the thoracic and lumbar vertebrae here, because when you're doing epidural, you are most commonly going to access the thoracic and lumbar vertebrae. When you're doing spinal, you are not going to go beyond the lumbar vertebrae because it is not recommended to go any space above L1. Why, I shall tell you later. Okay. So why is it important to know these two? The orientation of the spinous process decides the angle of needle insertion, right? So this is a simple line diagram, the sagittal section of your spine. Here you can see L3, L4, for example. And you can see the wide distance between the two and the direction of the spinous processes. So when you insert the needle here in the lumbar area, you will almost go perpendicular to the skin. On the other hand, if you see the thoracic vertebra, the direction of the spinous processes is more acute. So when your needle direction will be more acute, and the space between the two is also less. So the technicality is more difficult in the thoracic compared with the lumbar vertebrae for epidural analgesia. Okay, so this is wide interlaminar space. This is narrow, right? And you can see the direction of the needle. It is almost perpendicular or slightly in the upward and forward direction. Unlike in thoracic, it is really acute to the skin, so it's more difficult. So here we can see the upper thoracic is most difficult, followed by lower thoracic, and then the lumbar. Okay, so we are moving to the next segment. Applied anatomy is ligaments. So what are the ligaments of importance? It is important because we are going to cross all these structures while doing the procedure. Again, to note, anteriorly you have the vertebral body, posteriorly you have the spinous processes. Okay, so here you can see in red the anterior longitudinal ligament. The blue is the posterior longitudinal ligament, supraspinous ligament, ligamentum flavum. Here is the spinal canal in the center. Okay, so when you're doing the procedure, you're obviously going to go through the skin and subcute. The first give way, that is when you feel the needle suddenly has this loss of resistance, is the supraspinous ligament. Okay, the second prominent give way is the ligamentum flavum. This is a very classic give way. You may miss the supraspinous, but usually you don't miss the ligamentum flavum. You get a nice gritty crunch, like when you pass the epidural needle through this, and that is where you have to stop, because if you go any further, you're going to cross into the sub-arachnoid space and get CSF, which is definitely what you don't want. When you want to do spinal anesthesia, of course, it's a thinner needle and you feel the two giveaways and then you go into the sub-arachnoid space. And in between, you have the interspinous ligament. So to start again, first you have the supraspinous ligament, which goes from tip to tip. Then you have interspinous ligaments, which is between the spinous processes. Then you have the ligamentum flavum, which is a very tough structure. Then the spinal canal. Then you have posterior longitudinal ligament, and then the anterior longitudinal ligament. Moving on to spaces. So we are talking about epidural space and about subarachnoid space. So let's see where exactly they are located. So again, the sagittal section, right? Anteriorly vertebral body, posteriorly spinous processes. So you have the bright yellow structure, which is the ligamentum flavum. Next to that, in brown, you have the dura mater. Then the arachnoid, which is called arachnoid because it's similar to the cobweb structure, like out of a spider. And the pia mater in red. Okay, so from outward inside, you have dura mater, arachnoid, and pia mater. So this epidural space is actually a potential space between the bright yellow part, that is the ligamentum flavum, and the dura. While the subarachnoid space is a space between arachnoid and pia mater. So subarachnoid space is the space between arachnoid and pia mater. It contains CSF, which is formed mainly by the choroid plexus of the lateral, third, and fourth ventricles. As the spinal and cranial arachnoid spaces are continuous, you can sometimes, if in a very unfortunate situation, you can also block the cranial nerves because the local anesthetics will migrate into the CSF above the foramen magnum. I have made this point specifically because, of course, in the routine practice, this doesn't happen. But it is very important to know how much drug to inject, at what speed you are supposed to inject, and maintaining total aseptic precautions, because if you are casual about it, you may introduce infection, which will directly reach the brain, and you may get meningitis. Okay, so all these things are very important. Also, how you position the patient after doing the spinal or the epidural, because that can cause ascent of the drug, which you don't want. And you may block your thoracic, upper thoracic, which can lead to labored breathing. You can block the cervical and so on and so forth. And those are really bad complications, which of course we'll be discussing in the later videos. Moving on, epidural space is the space between dura and ligamentum flavum. It is an irregular column of fat, lymphatics, and blood vessels. Okay, it contains the brachial plexus. So what are the anatomical boundaries? Cranially, you have the foramen magnum, which is like the skull base. Caudally, you have the sacrococcygeal ligament, which is used to access the caudal epidural. Anteriorly, you have posterior longitudinal ligament. Laterally, the vertebral pedicles, and posteriorly, the ligamentum flavum and vertebral lamina. If you see the depth at the midline at L2, it may be around 6 millimeters. These are all arbitrary values. 4 to 5 millimeters in the mid-thoracic region. It is the least in the areas where there are thoracic and cervical enlargement of the spinal cord, that is T9 to T12 and C3 to T2 respectively. Coming to the part of layers, here the layers mean the anatomical structures you are going to cross to actually reach the sub-arachnoid space or the epidural space. So there are two approaches. Most classical is the midline approach, where we use routinely. But sometimes when we face difficulties, or in elderly patients where there is a calcification of these ligaments, the access becomes difficult in the midline, or if there is some anatomical variation, then we may use the paramedian approach. So when we use the midline approach, the structures crossed are skin, subcutaneous fat, supraspinous ligament, interspinous ligament, ligamentum flavum, dura mater, subdural space, arachnoid mater, and subarachnoid space. So here, if you compare that with the paramedian approach, you encounter skin, subcutaneous fat. You are bypassing both the supraspinous and interspinous ligaments. You just go through the paraspinous muscle directly to come to the ligamentum flavum, then dura mater, subdural space, arachnoid mater, and subarachnoid space. So our discussion cannot end here because we need to talk about the nerves, because those are the most important structures we want to block for anesthesia or analgesia. So we are already familiar with this diagram. So there are 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, and 5 fused sacral vertebrae. What about the nerves? So we have 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal nerve. The interesting thing is we have 7 cervical, but 8 cervical nerves. So why is this so? Well, the first 7 cervical nerves, they all go above the vertebral, about the respective vertebrae. So, for example, the C2 nerve will go above the C2 vertebra, right? But when you come to the C8, that is the 8th cervical nerve, it does not go above, it goes below. So it goes below C8 and above T1. Subsequently, after T1 to L5, all the nerves go below the corresponding vertebra. Okay, so T1 will go below T1, and suppose D5 will go below D5, and so on and so forth. Okay, the spinal cord at birth, it terminates at L3. But as you grow and the entire anatomy is completed, it ends at the lower border of L1 vertebrae. This is the reason we do not give spinal at a level above L2-3, because there is a risk of damaging the spinal cord. So when you have these nerves, you have the dorsal, that is the afferent root, and the ventral, that is the efferent root. So nerve roots, they come out, they join to form the DRG, that is the dorsal root ganglion, and they exit as the spinal nerves. So basically there are 31 spinal nerves. The dura, arachnoid, and paramater, then similarly, subsequently, when they exit, they protect the peripheral nerves and form the epineurium, perineurium, and endoneurium, respectively. Below the conus, the roots are oriented parallel, and they simulate or they look like a horse's tail or the cauda equina. Nerve roots of the cauda equina move freely within the CSF. It's like the CSF is bathing them. So when you do any procedure in this area, there is very low risk of damaging the spinal nerves, because the nerves simply get displaced rather than being pierced by the needle. Knowledge of surface anatomy is very important if you're doing any procedure on the back, because they are all blind procedures. We basically go with the feel of doing things. Of course, with the advent of ultrasound and everything, but still you don't know the anatomy, you don't know where to place your ultrasound probe. And it's impossible to really count vertebrae from C1 to L5. So we have these certain markers, so as to say, so we know where exactly we have this needle insertion. So first, discussing about spinal anesthesia, there is this imaginary line, the Tuffier's line, which is drawn between the iliac crests. It traverses the body of the L4 vertebra, which is the most common level. So we most commonly give spinal anesthesia in the L3, L4 space. Okay, so because it's easy to identify and it's usually very easily accessible. The other surface anatomy landmark is the T7, T8 interspace, which you can feel at the lower limits of the scapulae. The D5 is where you have the spine of the scapula. Okay, if you feel that the 12th rib intersects with the L2 vertebral body, and of course, C7 is the most prominent cervical vertebra. So if you want to do cervical epidural, or you want to count downwards from the cervical to go to upper thoracic, then you can use that as a landmark. So the knowledge of surface anatomy is very important. In the next video, we are going to be talking about the technique and the physiology, surrounding spinal and epidural anesthesia. Okay, so to conclude, to know everything is impossible, but there are these subtopics which, if you even read a little about each, you will be able to have a better preparation and better understanding of the technique and have a greater success in doing your central neuraxial blocks. We have covered the vertebrae, ligaments, spaces, layers, and of course, nerves. Thank you very much for listening. Do subscribe to Edusurg Surgical Clinics. There's a vast amount of information available, not only for doctors, for people to know about the disease process and how to deal with it. Okay, if you have any comments and suggestions, do write in the comment section below. And if you like this video, do press the like button. Thank you very much.